Good afternoon. It is Saturday, January 5th, 2019 at 1:03 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be recovering today with some additional information the case of Dennis Montgomery. Big League Politics did an article the other day talking about the Montgomery revelation, so to speak, and I wanted to refresh this for folks, give them an update on what's been happening from some newly sort of filed court documents and what the implications here are. It is another case of we don't really know, but it's very important to understand because it's been brought up several times over the past 2 years. And the information that Dennis Montgomery, this whistleblower, brought forward proves that the United States government was spying on Donald Trump back in 2013, and earlier, to be honest. So let me just give you an abridged version of the story, and then we'll get into the details. Blixeth here on screen is a real estate tycoon developer who was married to a woman. They purchased or invested in a technology company, and the wife brought in a partner. His name was Dennis Montgomery. The marriage doesn't go very well. Blixeth files for divorce. They're going through the divorce proceedings, and the wife's side knows all sorts of things they shouldn't know far in advance about what's going on in the divorce case and what his attorneys have in terms of the case. And obviously with billions of dollars involved here, it was really important. So I'll make this bigger. So Blixeth and his attorneys start to think that possibly they're being hacked, and they think that they're being hacked by the partner in the business, Dennis Montgomery. So it gets really heated, and finally Blixeth decides that he's going to bring Montgomery in for depositions, etc. And every time he brings him in for a deposition, the CIA is there. Every time they go and meet for these depositions. And so, Blixeth starts to scratch his head and say, what the hell is going on here? You know what I mean? Long story short, fast forward a little bit, Montgomery reaches out to Blixeth and says, I'd really like to talk to you. Blixeth gives him the cold shoulder. Blixeth says, I want nothing to do with you. You were hacking into my attorneys. And Montgomery says, yeah, I was hacking into your attorneys. But listen, I have a brain aneurysm. I'm probably not going to make it. And I have to make some things right. Montgomery finally gets Blixeth here to meet with him and moves on, starting to spill that he has 14 hard drives full of documents and evidence, etc., proving that he was a brilliant genius NSA guy, computer guy, CIA, NSA. He worked as a contractor for the CIA and the NSA. He had been directed to do some really nefarious things that started off with terrorism and then moved into spying on American citizens, including now President Donald Trump and many, many others, including everyday Americans. So Montgomery and Blixeth start to work together to try and get the story out. Horrible, horrible story, which we'll go into. Blixeth here goes to Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County in Arizona because there are over 100,000 citizens in his county that have been exposed in this ridiculous breach of our constitutional rights by our U.S. government. Montgomery performing all of these actions at the direction and behest of James Clapper and John Brennan. This is 2013 that this recording's happening after the Snowden revelations come out. So basically, they go to Sheriff Joe because Sheriff Joe is just in the earlier stages of the birth certificate, and this is during the Obama administration, and Blixeth says if there's anyone who's going to try and do anything about this, it's going to be you. And he tries to work with Sheriff Joe to get immunity for Montgomery so that he can spill what he knows without being prosecuted for it, and has immunity so he can kind of blow the whistle on all this. And in this recording we're going to listen to, thank you Jed Clampett for providing it to me 2 years ago. In this recording we're going to listen to together, and then another subsequent recording after that, you're going to hear some of the details. Now, this recording is an hour and 20 minutes long. We're not going to listen to the entire thing. I do have this uploaded on my channel in its entirety, and I will provide the link for you in the description box below. I think that most of you guys would really love listening to this. It's not boring. It is really interesting. And I found out through some research that I can't 100% confirm that this is the case, but this was released by a judge in a case. And that was interesting to me. I can't, it's a little bit shady, to be honest, but that's what I'm hearing. I'm trying to pin that down a little bit more for you guys. Long story short, they go through this whole conversation about what Montgomery actually did. Blixeth says to Obama comes out and starts talking about how he's going to prosecute Snowden because Snowden didn't go through the proper channels to blow the whistle on what the NSA was doing. And this was right after Brennan and Clapper sat in front of Congress and perjured themselves when they said that there was nothing going on with American citizens and they weren't spying on, all that nonsense. They were. Now, Obama comes out and says, I'm going after Snowden because he didn't use the right channels. So Blixeth says to Montgomery, hey, listen, let's do this the right way. I want you to file whistleblower complaints with like every last organization you can possibly think of. He does. 30 of them. They go unanswered. All of them go unanswered. In the midst of all this, they're also recording a report with Fox News. Fox News comes out and records with them for an entire week. Now retired reporter does the story. They never air the story. And inside of the recording we're about to listen to, you're going to hear them talk about the fact that Fox is getting ready to air the story. Fox, Sheriff Joe kind of like gives a skeptical perspective on whether or not Fox is doing the right thing. And Blixeth here says, listen, they're so pissed off about the Obama administration going after their journalists. Roger Ailes says he wants to take down Obama no matter what. So I'm sure this story's going to air. It never airs. Fast forward to 2017. This stuff starts to bubble up a little bit more. I started covering it in February, and then Sarah Carter and John Solomon come out with a report a few months later. They say they've been working with him for a few months, that there's documented proof that this stuff is going on. He files a lawsuit represented by Larry Klayman from Freedom Watch. He files a lawsuit, and it's a civil lawsuit against James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, all of them. And the lawsuit goes through the process, and ultimately it ends up getting dismissed with prejudice. And there's a transcript available, which we're going to piece through because it is super interesting for a number of different reasons. And we're going to go through the transcript together at the end of the video, which hang on, guys, for that because you don't want to miss it. But basically it's dismissed with prejudice, and I'm going to tell you why I think that is. Larry Klayman has won several high-profile cases that are basically, against the government, and Judge Leon was the one who was presiding over the ones that he did get injunctions on. Klayman refers to Leon several times throughout this transcript we're going to go through together as one of the last judges with principle. The problem here is that they in their what I've learned after digging through probably 1,000 lawsuits at this point, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not an attorney. So take this with whatever weight you want to put on it. They put things in these lawsuits sometimes, in my opinion, are just a reason for the judge to rule this way. It's almost like being a little bit ridiculous. If you can't prove something beyond a shadow of a doubt, why throw it in the lawsuit, giving the lawsuit the looseness it would need to be tossed? With prejudice, no less. When you've got something this important. Now, in this lawsuit, Montgomery finally is able to get in front of the FBI. They give him limited use immunity. He testifies before them for several hours. He provides the hard drives. He provides all the information. He gives them 2 years to act on it, and nothing. Silence. Crickets. This is Comey. So I know a lot of you are saying, well, of course, crickets. Yeah, I get it. But there's some interesting stuff that we're going to go into. Anyway, long story short, I feel like personally, and maybe one day I'll get to interview Larry Klayman and ask him about this, because I started reading this transcript, and then I started reading an associated case, and then from there I started going down another rabbit hole, and then I just decided I was going to start researching all of the cases that Larry Klayman has open and closed for the past 2 years. Whew. Let me tell you something, guys. I was reading lawsuit documents. The past 2 days, basically, I've been my nose to the computer screen just reading Larry Klayman lawsuits. He's an interesting character. Very interesting character. Former U.S. attorney, founded Freedom Watch, founded Judicial Watch, left Judicial Watch in some controversy. But Larry Klayman's an interesting cat. Anyway, there's a 10-minute and 18-second introduction. Now, there's a lot more here. So just because you heard the introduction, don't leave. I'm just following the overwhelming request of a number of people on my channel to kind of summarize what I'll be talking about in the video at the very beginning before I then go into the details and the nitty-gritty. I've done that for you. Let's listen to some of this audio. I guess we're going to listen to about 15 minutes of it. Do not click away. It is very, very interesting. Off we go. I might stop it to interject some comments, but probably not. It's pretty self-explanatory. So we have Blixeth in here. Blixeth is kind of as an advocate for Dennis Montgomery. And then we have Sheriff Joe, Mike Zullo, and one other detective in the room when this recording is recorded.
Stop her company, you don't get the alimony. She refused to. Turns out she has a partner named Dennis Lee Montgomery. That's the name you gotta remember.
Easy to remember. That's
He's a very.
I'll sit down with you after. I want to try to follow.
He's a very genius computer guy. What they did is they were working for the CIA, and they mask it as I'm sure you'll remember this. The contracts with the CIA, which I had plenty of copies, said that they were decoding Al Jazeera television, said that there was broadcast embedded. Remember that?
Yeah.
Owned by Gore.
Well, Gore's got part of it now, but it's all bullshit. That was bullshit. That was a front by the CIA. And this guy worked for Brennan and Clapper. Those were the two guys running it. He started out in 2004 with another partner in Reno, Nevada, called Intrepid. They collected about $40 million for the CIA, from the CIA. Top security clearance, all kinds of letters, emails, fallout against my wife in 2006. They started a new company that she owns, and they started doing the same business for the government. What it really turns out they were doing is they were hacking into all of America. Everything they said they didn't do, that Brennan said recently, and mainly Clapper, is all bullshit. And I've got it right here. So this guy, during the divorce, it was very contentious, front page Wall Street Journal and all this nonsense.
Between you and your...
Yeah.
Okay.
So we accused him publicly, this Montgomery, of hacking into our attorney-client privilege because they knew too much. And we could never prove it. So we took his deposition several times. And something happened very weird. Every time we took his deposition, the head of the civil division, Carlotta Wells, of the Department of Justice would show up with CIA agents. Just show up. Every court appearance. CIA agents. Head of the civil division. I said, Jesus Christ, something's got to be wrong here. So, in 2006, when my wife got together with the guy, when he left the first company, he gets a call from the CIA guy named Joe Liberatore and says, the FBI is going to raid your house in 3 days. They just got a FISA search warrant from the FISA court. So he takes all the hard drives that he made copies of. FBI comes in, raid him. Mike Flynn, the lawyer who's here with me, was representing the guy at the time. They go to court, federal judge says, this is bullshit, throws it out, says, there's obviously something here that we don't know about. And the government came in and imposed a state secret privilege and a protective order in Nevada, because that's where the guy lived. And so they said, anything you did as a government contractor, you can never tell. Well, they were trying to keep the guy quiet from what he really did. So we take the guy's deposition, and I get nothing out of him. The last deposition was almost 2 years ago now. Palm Desert, California, a little tiny legal office, and all these CIA agents show up with guns, and Carlotta Wells, head of the civil division of the DOJ. So what the hell are you showing up for? Well, cut and paste 2012 June. Montgomery calls me, and he goes, I want to talk to you. I said, I don't want to talk to you, you son of a bitch. Why do you want to talk to me? I said, you've been hacking into my attorneys. And he goes, I want to talk to you. He said, I've got a brain aneurysm. I'm probably not going to make it, and I need to get some things right. So I reluctantly meet him, but I give him a subpoena. We give him a friendly subpoena, so anything he gave to me was under the guise of a subpoena. He says, you know, you guys are right. I did hack into all your stuff, and I gave it to your ex-wife and all the lawyers. And he said, there's a lot more. He said, what I really did as a government subcontractor was I hacked into all of America for Brennan and Clapper. And I said, wow, that's pretty heavy stuff. Can you prove it? So it's taken me 8 months of dancing with this guy. And finally, he starts giving more evidence, and then it just blew me away. So I called Fox News, and Carl Cameron, you know, the reporter, Carl's been there 27 years, and I trust Carl. Carl came flying out with his film crew, and they filmed for a week in the last 30 days. The guy had aneurysm surgery in the last 3 months. It was not successful. He probably will not live. So I think what it is, he wants 10 years under, 8 years under a rock. He's tired of it. He may not live. He wants to get his life squared away. And he's pissed off at the administration. He got a death threat in writing last week. And so I said to him, when the Snowden thing came down, he starts laughing to me. He goes, Snowden is a punk. He doesn't have any information like I've got. So he starts showing me what he has. And I'm going, holy shit. He's got 900 million phone calls recorded. I mean, you call me, how long, what date, what time of day. Okay, that's one thing. I did it for the government. This is on a government computer, paid for by the government, CIA, at Fort Washington, Maryland, which is 10530 Riverview Road in Fort Washington, Maryland. Then he's got bank accounts with the passwords and the usernames that the government got, just randomly all over the country. There's 153,000 in this county alone. 153,000 people were hacked in by Brennan and Clapper. And I got all their names.
Brennan is head of the CIA now.
CIA.
Clapper is what?
He is DNI.
The Department of Intelligence.
National Intelligence. So those are the two common factors. Now, if you go back the string, you thread the string back with Brennan. Brennan was CIA under Bush 43. He was like executive director. My ex-wife and Jack, I was on Jack Kemp's board for 10 years. Jack was a dear buddy of mine. So I was in the Republican circles. So my ex-wife asked Jack Kemp to go to Cheney to try and speed up a new government contract, which was slow. So they take her to the vice president. He says, give me a few days. Comes back and he says, we don't want any part of this. And they fire Brennan. So they must have figured something was skunky. So they fired Brennan. Brennan goes to work as the CEO of Analysis Group in Washington, D.C. They're basically ex-CIA guys that do contracting for the government. Private version of their old job. So he goes to Obama, then senator, and says, you should hire us in that analysis group if you're going to run for president. Obama does. They have tons of money, millions of dollars. And if you may not recall this, Joe, but there was a little bit of a flap about the birth certificate back then. There was an accusation that someone had gotten into the birth certificate records of Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney, and Obama.
Hillary talked about it.
Yeah, she really raised a big deal of it. There was a young man working for Brennan at the CIA that came over to Analysis Group. And he was kind of the dirty computer kid. I don't know that, I'll tell you what I know factual and what I believe to be true. We believe that they got in and actually altered his birth certificate. Brennan did at an analysis group, and they had to disguise it by doing something or looking like they did something to Clinton and Romney, so it wasn't specific to Obama. Somehow this word got around in D.C., and an investigation started, and they called the kid as a witness. He got a bullet between the eyes the night before the hearing. It's all public record. So he's dead. He can't testify. So then Obama gets elected. Brennan then wants to be CIA. That was his quest in life. If you recall, he got turned down because of the waterboarding. So Obama then
Waterboarding that McCain, like Republican said,
right,
hates waterboard. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Always remember the McCain connection.
So, as an alternative, Obama moves in Brennan 3 doors down the White House from his office. So maybe a little quid pro quo.
Special assistant or something.
Some bullshit. So then time goes by, and then Brennan's now CIA. So let's keep the story going. So about 3 or 4 months ago, this guy's showing me 900 million phone calls. And I see myself in there. I see people I know. I mean, I see Donald Trump in there a zillion times, and Bloomberg's in there. And
Am I in there?
we're looking for you right now.
Mike Zula. That's important.
It takes a long time to go through 900 million, unless you got a hell of a big computer. And so we're through about 40 million out of 900 million.
They're not on those flash drives.
No.
There's no way.
There's 3 million on this.
Mom's pretty good.
And there's bank records here.
You got the 130,000 from here on there.
I got a lot of them.
Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Are they alphabetical?
No. What they did was, let me tell you how they did it. So you got to understand the whole story. This Montgomery was such a brilliant computer guy. He figured out that they built, and started in 2004, they built this supercomputer in Reno, Nevada. Long, far away from CIA headquarters, but they were a contractor. And it was a room, twice as big as this room, full of massive computers that figured out how to break combinations of passwords. And so the idea was, it was very well intended. Let's go find Al-Qaeda's websites. Let's see if we can crack their password and save America. That's all great. It worked really well. So they could process about, at those days, maybe 10 million combinations a minute of your password off your computer. Well, 10 million a minute, pretty soon you start, the numbers click up and it works. Mm-hmm. So what they really did was they started going to all the terrorist websites in 2004, and they started reading their mail. And that was really great for America. Then when he left in late 2005, early 2006, and hooked up with my wife, ex-wife, they started it again, but they started in Bellevue, Washington, where they both lived. And then in 2009, the CIA came back to my ex-wife and to Montgomery and said, look, we want to do this the right way. What will it take? He said, it's going to take about $5 million worth of computers. And they said, okay, we got a place called Fort Washington, Maryland. It's disguised as a naval research center, but it's the CIA cyber headquarters in the world. So they said, you got to come back there and build it. You have to be there for a year. So Montgomery goes back there, and he builds what they call the hammer. And that's what the government nicknamed the hammer. And it's so goddamn powerful, it does 1 billion combinations a minute of passwords. So it's working great, and they're going after this terrorist, and Abdullah this, and Mohammed that. So Clapper at that time was the guy running it, because Brennan had gone off to analysis, but they're like this. So he walks in one day and he says, look, Dennis, we got a guy at Citi, we think he got a Citibank bank account. His name is, Omar or whatever. Can you get into Citibank's mainframe? Can you sneak in there and look for this guy without getting caught? Because there's no FISA court order. He gets in there, gets the guy's stuff, and they They say, shit, this is great. So then about a month later, he's got another 30 dames. They go into Citigroup and say, hey, here's 30 more dames. Works. Then they come back and say, look, why don't we, at the risk of getting caught by their detection system, why don't you download every customer that Citibank has and all their financial information? That way we got it. And he did. Then they went to Sprint for Verizon, AT&T, to all their switches, got it at night. What Montgomery did, the programming he invented, he would go into figure out their passwords and some of their security codes. He would then get into the mainframe and they'd shut off their detection device. So they could be in there for maybe an hour. And then they'd get out. So they wholesale across America. Everything that Clapper just said last Thursday they didn't do in front of the Senate and the House, he said all we got was phone calls. Well, I got financial records from Phoenix, Arizona with passwords and PIN numbers. That's more than phone calls. Credit cards, credit card numbers. And then they asked Montgomery, they said, look, we want you to go into the Florida voter registration computer. I want you to download it. Can you do that? I'll try. It goes in, gets all the voter registration. They say, I want you to burn it on some CDs, give it to Clapper. Does it? Doesn't think anything about it. A couple weeks go by, and they come back with new disc. And they say, upload this tonight on the Florida voter computer. So I kept thinking, what? They must be altering people's registration or something to help with the next election. But Carl Cameron figured it out because he went and checked. There was a big redistricting down in Florida that was advantaged Democrats. And he's going to report when the story breaks from Fox because he's got the voter registration records now. So then after Snowden comes out, Obama comes out on, I think, August 9th this year. And he said Snowden's been charged with 3 felonies. If he had followed the whistleblower protocol and come to us, he wouldn't be in trouble. So we're going to make that son of a bitch eat those words. So I had Montgomery, he filed 18 whistleblower complaints with the Inspector General of the Air Force, Inspector General of the CIA, the Inspector General of the United States, Holder. He sent an actual letter to Obama and to his private fax number, and how the hell he got it, I don't know. Carl Cameron confirmed that it was Obama's fax number. So he's got rejected 18 times. I have all the whistleblower complaints and rejections here. So he did the right thing. He said, hey, I'm an American, I'm not leaving the country. I work for the CIA. I went in for the government unauthorized, and I got all this financial information that's a violation of the 4th Amendment. And this needs to be told. They rejected it over and over and over. So that kind of leads to why I'm here. We started.
That's the juice. Like, at least the crux of the story, okay? There's another hour of this, and I implore you to go to the link in the description box below that I will provide for you. It'll say full audio, and click on it and listen to the entire recording. When you're done listening to it, pick up your jaw off the floor, and then let's figure out where we go from here. Now, gosh, there was more. From what I can gather, and again, it's hard, it appears as though Maricopa County, Arpaio, Zulo decided to use this guy, Montgomery, as a paid informant. They ran into some issues with them. It was a little bit weird, but they used him as a paid informant. And there are more recordings on the SoundCloud here that basically share and give more light. Here is when Arpaio was being questioned just recently from 2016, and they're asking him all about Montgomery, the Department of Public Safety that was going after Arpaio. You remember they went after him? they start asking all kinds of questions about Montgomery, which is very interesting. Montgomery, while working with Zullo, goes to Lockheed Martin and is working with them and brings back information from there. Quickly, I will play a 1 minute and 54-second clip for you here, where Montgomery basically explains if he were nefariously possessing this information or wanted to target somebody. Maybe there's a reporter out there breaking a story that you don't like, or maybe there's another whistleblower who's, thinking about coming forward with information they know, or whatever. How the government can use this data, because the government, oh yeah, we're not going to do anything with it. It's not a big deal. It's incidental stuff. No big deal. It's fine. It's okay. Let's listen. 1 minute and 54 seconds.
So I want to ask you a question before we go any further. I'm a government. You know what? Through harvesting to protect the country, yada, 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 we inadvertently collected blah, 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 blah. It's innocuous information. Nothing could really be done with it.
Social security number, credit card numbers? Credit card number?
That's Montgomery.
What else could be done with this information? What could you do if you wanted to destroy the life of somebody with this information?
I'd go into their email accounts and I'd start uploading emails. I'd send pedophile picture links into their email accounts of pedophile kids. I'd say this guy's a pedophile. I would create a linked list. I'd upload into his email account all that. Then I'd download his email and say, look at all the websites this guy's been to. He's been to pedophile accounts.
How could you financially destroy somebody with this?
Oh, it's easy. I'd just go into his bank account, I'd go to the IRS. I'd take the information out. Let's say because I went into J. Edwards, Morgan Stanley. I go into his account, take all the information, send it over to the IRS, let him have it. Oh, really? He only claimed $87,000 this year. Well, here's all of his bank account records. Oh, by the way, they're offshore. I don't know if you knew that. There's an endless way I can do it. Right. There's so much data here. There's no way to protect yourself.
When you're doing this with Fox, you got to try to convey that because the public doesn't understand.
I've already said it twice.
Okay.
And I've said it on the record.
Okay.
And what I've said on the record is, it isn't innocuous information. The problem is, who has this?
That's right.
The guy walks out of the building, that's somebody's buddy, and he's over there charging bank accounts or getting into people's email accounts because he's got the passwords to them. That's why people are told to change your passwords all the time and all that. I mean, it goes on. I mean, what does the government say? We weren't document harvesting? I just showed you your fucking letter.
Pardon the language. That's basically the point here. Think of how many people, and they did it to him. They did it to Montgomery. They actually put out in 2014, when this started really gaining a little bit of traction, they started to put out horrible articles about him. They used the media to paint him as a con artist, a scammer, whatever, to taint his image in the media. But they hired him back again. So now we're going to get into some more interesting stuff. Now in the recording, if you guys go back and listen to it in full, you're going to hear that even on top of Donald Trump and other private citizens, which is bad enough, they hacked into FISA court judges. They hacked into Supreme Court judges. Right around the time that the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act was, right around the time that Justice Scalia passed away. It just gets more interesting. So we're going to get into the lawsuit transcript now for a minute. So I almost want to read this entire transcript to you because outside of like the meat and potatoes of it is actually a whole bunch of other, interesting stuff. Basically between Larry Klayman and the judge, who is Judge Leone. So I'm going to read some of this to you because it's really important. And I'm going to tell you where this information is right now, which nobody's spoken about that I've seen in the public space or the public sphere anywhere. So the parties introduce themselves, and then, hold on. Just for some background, Larry Klayman filed this case, in which he's also a defendant, by the way, and he says that it's related to another case that he has in front of this judge, Klayman versus Obama. And the judge is like, how on earth are these two cases related? Because if the cases are related, the same judge will hear them. And Larry Klayman wants this judge to hear this case because this judge is the same judge that ruled affirmatively for him in another case that he had. And he thinks that he's very, he's full of integrity. He's a great judge. And you'll see that throughout here. And you'll also see something really interesting that the judge, without acknowledging, acknowledges. So the judge says, how in God's name is this a related case to Klayman versus Obama? And Klayman says, well, actually, those are ongoing. And then the court's like, well, you listed it as related. And Klayman says, yes. And the judge says, that's how you got to me, but how is it really factually related? And Klayman says this, well, it's because it's a continuing course of conduct of my having been surveilled in the past. And also Montgomery was a part of that other case. We'd filed pleadings to say he was a material witness. We want to use him in that case, and we've requested that it move forward. And then the court says, well, now Klayman versus Obama was Section 215 of the Patriot Act. What you're looking at here is Section 702 of FISA, right? And Klayman says, well, we're alleging generally surveillance, not just 702, but there's references in the complaint to continuing violations as occurred in the case, and we made reference to that. My cell phones have been hacked, so have Mr. Montgomery's cell phones and computers, and this is part and parcel to what's been going on under 215 or under the USA Freedom Act. And consequently, since you're infinitely knowledgeable about this case, and because there's an overlap both in plaintiffs and in witnesses, and also in a continuing course of illegal conduct, they know no bounds, Your Honor, in terms of respecting either the law of the case in Klayman 1 and Klayman 2, the prior cases, or Congress's USA Freedom Act. We did talk about that in the pleadings. But for the matter, 702. But for that matter, 702, and we have 702 in the prior pleadings as well. And the judge says, well, the surveillance in the original Klayman versus Obama case was bulk connection of metadata from all cell phones in the U.S., and of course that's ended. And Klayman says, but Your Honor, we can get to that later. And then the court's basically pushing back, saying Congress passed a law prohibiting it in the aftermaths of that case. And Klayman is saying the case is not ended, though, and the court's saying the case maybe hasn't ended, but the conduct you're alluding to here postdates that. You're going after and concerned about targeting individuals who are opponents of the government that are part of this deep state thing, right? And I just wanted to note for you guys, which I forgot to do, stupid me. This was a transcript of a hearing that happened June 23rd, 2017. And he mentions the deep state. The judge mentions the deep state. And Klayman says, in part, let me just say here to clarify, is that Klayman 1, and I know for sure Klayman 2, have Section 702 violations alleged. That's number one. Number two, while Your Honor issued preliminary injunctions, they went up the D.C. Circuit and they were vacated, but the case never ended because we have ongoing claims there for a permanent injunction at a minimum. And I want to talk to you about service at the appropriate time. And listen to this is interesting, because it's difficult to serve these people, and I'll explain exactly how, the individuals, because he's suing Barack Obama as a private individual, or, you know what I mean? They don't work for the government anymore. We did send them a copy of the complaint and the temporary restraining and preliminary injunction motion by FedEx to their address. We sent it to them. We put them on notice. And frankly, it's an insult. I don't take it personally, but it's an insult to this court that no one is here on their behalf. They genuinely believe they're above the law. That's the bottom line. The hard fact is that we did plead 702 and those cases are alive. And while the D.C. Circuit, for whatever reason, they never really explained in the second order while they were vacating it, it was clear that they thought that the USA Freedom Act mooted it out. But it didn't, not with regard to the past conduct and the ongoing illegal conduct as we allege that they are violating in the USA Freedom Act. We allege that in the pleadings. And we've seen, and this will be the subject of discovery, that these agencies and the individuals know no bounds. There are recent orders by the Fisk Court, which were disclosed by Circa, which got out, which say that Defendant Comey and the FBI as well have been engaged in this illegal surveillance systematically over the time period of this case. And we did allege that it's broad. It would just cover both statutes, and it would cover, frankly, just ordinary concepts of the Fourth Amendment. With or without statutes, they violate the Fourth Amendment, and we pled that. You don't need the statutes. In fact, they don't care about the statutes. No law to them is worth respecting. So this is a very, very important case. Your Honor is the most knowledgeable about it, and that was the reason, notwithstanding the factual legal overlap, that we assigned it as related to you. So the court's like, okay, we'll go over the common facts. Meaning, what facts are common between this case and the other two? And Clayman says, yes, common facts concerning the violation of the Freedom Act and 702 of general surveillance in violation of the Fourth Amendment, hacking my cell phone on 3 occasions, hacking Mr. Montgomery's, attempting to hack his computer, and in fact succeeding on at least 1 occasion in doing that. This is not pie in the sky stuff, Your Honor. It's that I've been out here for the last 3 months going door to door on Capitol Hill, going to the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee. I even had a personal conversation with Chairman Grassley while he was walking across the mall after the Comey hearing a few weeks ago, and I filled him in on this. And consequently, these agencies know that I'm trying to bring Montgomery forward because this is, as Your Honor pointed out, an almost overwhelming, I think it's overwhelming, you can remove the word almost, violation of our Fourth Amendment. And it's getting to the point, and of course we've pled with regard to plaintiffs, myself and Mr. Montgomery, but it's getting to the point where even the president can't make a phone call and figure out that he's able to talk in confidence. I mean, things are being leaked right out of the White House about calls with various foreign heads of state and everything else. He's talking about Australia, this was back then. And it has to be the result of this continuing illegal surveillance, even on the president of this country. But that's just part and parcel to why it's happening to me. Because I've been out there as an advocate. I'm not representing this administration, but I want this president to succeed. I want him to be able to do the business of the affairs of the state in the public interest without feeling that he's got the sword of Damocles over his head, that these intelligence agencies, which he has fought with justly, I believe, are out to destroy him. But it's extremely illogical that they would be surveilling me, that they would be surveilling me. And when you look at even the reports that were released through the FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the order and what Circa, by the way, that's Sarah Carter at the time, was able to obtain, John Solomon, Sarah Carter of Sinclair Broadcasting and News, is that there is a recognition by even an individual who worked in the Obama administration who was in charge to investigate this, that attorney-client communications are being breached. So my standing here is clear-cut. So is Mr. Montgomery. But these are things we did allege in Clayman 1 and 2, and we're alleging them again. And those cases are alive. We're seeking a permanent injunction, and I was going to raise with Your Honor at the end of this status conference consolidating these actions, possibly consolidating them. But right now, I'm asking for a preliminary injunction and a temporary restraining order to preserve the evidence that Mr. Montgomery came forward to at the FBI. Now, how did that happen 2.5 years ago? I went to Judge Royce Lamberth. I don't have any cases in front of Judge Lamberth. And I asked him if he would help. He's one of the few people in Washington that I trust, and he's an honorable man. And then he introduced me to James Baker, the general counsel of the FBI. So Clayman went to a different judge who wasn't hearing any of the cases that he was working on and asked him, please help me get this to somebody that can do something about it. And I said to General Counsel Baker, I said, I want to meet with FBI Director Comey. This could be one of the biggest scandals, frankly, in American history, as Your Honor pointed out as well in his orders. And he assured me, well, Comey doesn't want to meet, but he'll be supervising this. I'm working with him on this. So we went to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, who is the top lawyer on counterterrorism and security measures, Deborah Curtis, in the U.S. Attorney's office here. I negotiated 2 immunity agreements for Dennis Montgomery, one to produce 47 hard drives which contain over 600 million pages of information, some of it classified. I've never seen it. I don't want to see it. I gave it under these grants of immunity to the FBI. Montgomery was then interviewed for 3 hours, as you know by definition under oath, by Special Agents Walter Giardina and William Barnett. For 2.5 years, we've heard nothing. I make inquiries, nothing coming back, not even that we're proceeding with the investigation. And then it becomes clear to me what's been going on with the reports of Circa and the FISC, that Comey himself was involved in this illegal surveillance. The FBI was. So to me, I think a reasonable inference arises, more than a reasonable inference, a likelihood that Comey told these agents to bury this investigation. And on top of that, you have the intelligence agency run by Clapper, DNI at the time, run by Brennan, who's been at odds with Trump and in my view is not a completely candid person, to put it diplomatically. He's been found lying under oath for Congress and they never did anything about it. The CIA had even surveilled Feinstein, who was the head of the Financial Committee at the time. That's not even in dispute that he lied about it in front of Congress, like Clapper did earlier to Senator Wyden. And so consequently, this is directly overlapping and it's not even close. And it's a continuation of this illegal conduct which knows no bounds. And I happen to be the #1 protagonist, and Montgomery is the biggest threat to them. And everything that Montgomery has said has proven to be correct. These agencies have tried to smear Montgomery in the past because they knew he was coming forward. He's been trying for years to have somebody listen to him. And I'm hoping that Congress will do something. But this court has to do something. Because Congress, I believe, either knew that this was going on through some of those oversight agencies, or they're fearful that information can start flying out of NSA, CIA, and FBI files about them and ruin their political career, as they're attempting to do with President Trump right now. Your Honor, listen to this. I have great faith in you. I believe you're an honest man and you are a courageous judge. There are very few in the country, and there are very few, frankly, in this courthouse. And I don't mean to disparage anybody, but I've had experiences over the last few years with judges appointed by Democrat presidents who have slow-rolled cases and who themselves, even the one case that involved my former group Judicial Watch that it was a party to, never resulted in the deposition of Hillary Clinton. Who responded? David Kendall on behalf of Hillary Clinton, and she couldn't remember anything. So if it's not you, Your Honor, it will never happen. And there's a very strong case for you to have this case. And as you pointed out at the first status conference in Clayman 1, this is a case of the pinnacle of national importance. It continues to be, not just for me and Mr. Montgomery, but for all Americans and for the President of the United States, who has been subject to continuing leaks, continual legal surveillance, both under the USA Freedom Act and 702 as we have, Mr. Montgomery and I. And frankly, this country hangs in the balance. Even the President of the United States can't pick up the phone and do business, or for that matter, have a meeting with the ambassador in an Oval Office without somehow it getting out. And just yesterday when the president said, well, I didn't have any tapes myself, he says, but maybe there are tapes that were made by the intelligence agencies, that's likely. So that's the reason why this is related. Now remember, didn't want to cough in your ear. This is in closed court. Like, this is not like on television or anything like that. So this impassioned plea that Clayman is making is in court, and I have never seen this transcript read anywhere before. So that was pretty awesome. Court says, let's hear what Mr. Gilligan has to say on the topic. Mr. Gilligan is the lawyer for the government. Well, as promised, Mr. Clayman has brought what we can call Clayman 4 before the court. He has not made good on his promise, however, to come forth with the hard evidence that he described, or at least alluded to in his briefing, his most recent briefing in Clayman 1 and 2. What we're seeing, as usual, Your Honor, are Mr. Clayman's unilateral suspicions that the NSA is messing with him. There is no evidence that he or Mr. Montgomery is an actual target of surveillance by the NSA or any other agency. With respect to the hard drives that are also the subject of Mr. Clayman's PI motion, there's no evidence that the hard drives that he provided to the FBI several years ago are in danger of destruction. And in fact, I can tell you, Your Honor, that the hard drives are now in the possession of the intelligence community's Office of Inspector General, a very secure location. That's Horowitz. So there is no risk here that those hard drives or any of their contents are going to be destroyed anytime soon. That's Horowitz. Horowitz has them. So the preliminary injunction motion is meritless, Your Honor, and coming to the stated purpose of this hearing, which was scheduling what we would propose, and the court says, well, it's a little more than that, because there's preliminary question, frankly, of whether this court should keep this case as a related case. And if I decide against keeping it as a related case, it would go back, so to speak, into the wheel, and then now I could get it again in theory as an unrelated case, right? If you count the senior judges, there's basically about 18 judges on the court, and there's a 1 in 18 chance that I guess I could get it as an unrelated case. But if I decide it's not a related case, it goes back into the pool and it may or may not return to courtroom 18. I just don't know. There's more talk here He basically goes and says, you know, there's frivolous allegations. We're not spying on anybody, blah, 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 blah. They come to some sort of, well, he says, however, in Claimant 2, the allegation is that surveillance has been conducted of Mr. Claimant and his clients under the NSA's PRISM program. Paragraph 20 of the complaint does allege surveillance under Section 702, and the recent FISC order that Mr. Claimant alludes to and discusses at some length in his complaint also involves surveillance under Section 702. So there may be some overlap there. They talk about minimization procedures. The court says that they're hesitant to make a choice prior to making a decision about it being related, whether they call it a TRO or a PI case. The court says we have a 21-day rule to set a hearing, and then the government argues that, you know, well, it's the holidays and, you know, whatever. He says, again, we looked into this. The hard drives are in a secure facility within the Intelligence Community's Office of Inspector General. I refer your honors to pages 17 and 18 of the supporting brief. It says there that he wants the hard drives turned over to the Inspector General for safekeeping. Well, that's where they are. And in fact, they've been there since August of last year, so August of 2016. So there's no emergency with respect to the hard drives, and there's no evidence of surveillance. There's no basis here for expedition. And regarding the August 7th date, people have vacations. It's summertime. Now, Claimant starts asking, well, okay, the hard drives are there, but what about the videotape deposition by Montgomery? And Gilligan says, the attorney for the government says he doesn't know where that is. And Claimant says, well, that's crucial because he has a brain aneurysm and he could die. So I'd like them to present an affidavit to the court. And the court says, is he in the hospital right now? And Claimant says he's been in the hospital numerous times, yes, and he could go at any moment. He's about 58 years old. Claimant says that's why I was pushing to get this investigation done at the FBI, and that's why I was communicating with the general counsel. So I'd ask this court to order them to produce a sworn affidavit as to the whereabouts of these hard drives and also the video deposition under oath to Special Agents Giardina and Barnett. Then they talk about the immediacy of the case. And they're saying basically the Constitution's being ignored every day because it's not something they could just like la-di-da about. Mr. Montgomery submitted an affidavit and I submitted an affidavit and testified to the fact that he was able to determine himself that he was being hacked and surveilled, and he's an expert. And then the court says, well, just give me some rough idea how he determined that. And then Claimant says he's an expert in computer technology. He's the person. After 9/11, Mr. Montgomery worked for E-Trepid. The owner was Warren Trepp, the owner. Trepp was the owner of a casino in Las Vegas. He developed facial recognition software to surveil people to the gaming tables. People who could rip off the casino, criminals and others, they would stop them. The FBI, the NSA, and the CIA got wind of his technology, and they went out to E-Trepid and decided that they could use his expertise to develop software to disencrypt the video messages that bin Laden was sending out to Al Jazeera. And what Montgomery developed was software that could peel back the veneer on these videos because bin Laden was using them actually to give directions to his so-called terrorist groups. Montgomery became so well respected inside of the intelligence agencies that a national security reporter, James Risen, wrote in a recent book, some which was accurate and others designed to discredit Montgomery, but that he was the franchise. He was the emperor of the war on terror, and he could walk into the president's office or the vice president's office because this was getting top priority. And consequently, he's a major player, and he worked closely in this interview. He testified to the FBI that he'd worked closely with James Clapper, closely with John Brennan, closely with General Alexander, and others, and he observed them conducting illegal surveillance on not just Chief Justices of the Supreme Court, other justices. Justice Ginsburg is one example. 156 judges, President Trump and his family before he became president, and even yours truly. They got my stuff in 2007, my banking records in Miami when I was down there. I've never looked at any of this stuff, but that's what he testified to. I was permitted to sit in by the FBI as his attorney. Consequently, Montgomery knows what's going on. So I had earlier come, I didn't have the chance to explain in detail before, but I'd actually put him in front of Your Honor in Claimant 1 and Claimant 2, saying he's a material witness. I'd asked you to interview him in camera because you have a security clearance. You can listen to him. Before he had more health problems because he had more information and is more expertise by a mile than even Edward Snowden. But he did the right thing. He didn't flee to Russia. For years, he was trying to come forward to various congressional committees and inspectors general to blow the whistle. He filed whistleblower complaints until he found me. And that's why there is a tremendous overlap in these cases. And then the court says, you got access to these documents how? As a contractor? As a contractor, yeah, and that's why I got them immunity. I do criminal defense work as well as civil work. I'm more of a civil lawyer, but I do criminal defense. So I got him immunity agreements so he'd come forward and not fear having to produce it and having to testify. And then the judge asks, the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C.? Claimant says, yep, and the FBI. And this was at the highest level. It was right under Comey. He was supervising, according to Baker, his general counsel. Now, they're both gone now because of what happened, obviously. We don't need to get into that. But there is this direct one-on-one overlap. And yes, I'm glad that Mr. Gilligan was candid on that and said that we did lead a continuing violation of 215 and we pled 702. And in any event, 702 is part of Claimant 2 for sure. And these cases are live. Even though there were preliminary injunctions issues, they're going forward. Now, there's an issue. They can go forward and they should go forward. We ask for preliminary injunctions and they continue to violate the law. Your junctions are a lot different than some hapless piece of legislation up on Capitol Hill, where there's no consequence to violating it. You have contempt powers, Your Honor. You could bring them back, and we can conduct a contempt hearing as to whether or not in Claimant 1 and 2, these things are continuing. In addition, in the context of this case. So that's why consolidation may be appropriate. They can go on separate tracks now that there's a motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. But there's an urgency. The court says, as a practical matter, assuming I were to keep it for the sake of discussion only, I can't imagine a scenario where there would be a hearing on the PI within a month. That's the end of July. So at that point, Claimant says, perhaps, Your Honor, now that there was also an allegation in the complaint because we filed a legitimate Privacy Act request for 302 reports of the interviews that Montgomery gave. They have special agents, Giardina and Barnett, had to have prepared them, and those should be turned over forthwith. Then they would go back and forth. Why should they do 302s when there's videotapes? Just do a transcript of the videotape. And Claimant's like, please, let's get a copy of the videotape, and Your Honor can keep custody of these things. Listen, I trust you. I do not trust these agencies under the circumstance. I would ask that Your Honor take custody of both the hard drives and the videotape. And you have a security clearance, and we can craft a procedure when we get to hearing that if there's classified information, Your Honor could hear it in camera. I don't even have to be there. I trust you. I know you're an honorable man. So that's why this case has to move forward. There is a direct overlap, and I appreciate Mr. Gilligan admitting that. And just as a practical matter, it's not a legal consideration. It's not legal. It's not why I signed it to you initially as related. But if it goes back into this courthouse, listen, if it goes back into this courthouse, I'll never see it again as a reality. Nothing has come out of this courthouse in years. The court says, well, Claimant says, it's tough, okay? Politics in this town is rampant. It's out of control. It's infected the judiciary. It's infected the judiciary. It hasn't affected you. Then the court says something interesting. If I had sent it back to the clerk's office to be put back in the wheel, so to speak, it could end up with Judge Lamberth. Claimant says, well, very unlikely. The court says Judge Lamberth could get it. Claimant says, I don't want to roll the dice. It's not a legal consideration, but it's a practical fact of life that this case will never go anywhere if it goes to anyone other than Lamberth. And I can't go to Lamberth because Lamberth assisted me in taking Montgomery to the FBI. He would have a conflict. So basically, the judge, Leon, is admitting that this case will not get a fair shake if it doesn't go to either him or Lamberth. This was stunning to me. It really was. I'm like, wow, they're basically admitting it. Like, you don't usually hear a judge basically admit in open court that the judicial system is corrupt. And he did. It could go to Lamberth. It could maybe go to Lamberth for hearing. It's not a legal consideration. I don't want to roll the dice. Let's go through this one more time. Politics is rampant. It's out of control. It's infected the judiciary. It hasn't affected you, the court, judge. If I had sent it back to the clerk's office to put back in the wheel, so to speak, it could end up with Judge Lamberth. Very unlikely. Judge Lamberth could get it. I don't want to roll the dice. It's not a legal consideration, but it's a practical fact of life that this case will never go anywhere if it goes to anyone other than Lamberth. I can't go to Lamberth because Lamberth assisted me in taking Montgomery to the FBI. He would have a conflict. Oh, okay. And Lamberth himself may have been surveilled. He changes the subject. Down here, he says, things are coming out of this administration that are contrary to the interest of the administration. Their own people that are supposed to work under them, both at Justice and elsewhere, are out there and they're trying to harm the administration. So why wouldn't they destroy this stuff? And it deals with former FBI Director Comey. And in fact, Montgomery would testify that Robert Mueller, whatever you want to call him, who he worked with, was doing the same thing. So they were both engaged in illegal surveillance at the FBI. This is a very, very important case. And if Your Honor does not entertain it, it will never see the light of day. Because my experience for the last 3 months on Capitol Hill, I walked around like a lawyer just out of law school, 30 years old, going around to various congressional offices. First, I met with Steve King of the Judiciary Committee. He put me in touch with Goodlatte. I talked with his staff. I laid it out. I had several meetings. Then I went to Grassley over at the Judiciary Committee. I met with a friend of mine who works for Hatch. I hear nothing about that. I called several times. I meet with them for at least an hour. Then I went to Nunez, and I met with Souza, one of his lawyers, and I explained what was at stake. Never heard anything. Then I went to Burr's office. He's the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Nothing. They don't want to get into this because they've seen what happens. If they push, stuff will be out there in the files about their files. I call it the Anthony Weiner factor. So I'm not saying they're like Anthony Weiner, but I'm just saying it's a problem. Court says, well, I'll tell you what. I'll noodle it over the weekend. If I were to decide to keep it, I would set a briefing schedule and then set a hearing. The moment I'd be inclined, if I were to keep it, to have the hearing in August or something like that and give the government till the date they requested to file their pleadings and give you a time that's fair for you to reply whatever they file. There's a lot of moving parts. I understand the importance of keeping constitutional violations to a minimum. The Supreme Court has made that very clear, and so has the D.C. Circuit. But as it is, if the case were to be on a PI track, it would be getting, by definition, expedited treatment. That's what it gets, expedited treatment. So I'll let you know Monday, counsel. He asks them again to take into custody the 302s and the tape, etc. The court says, assuming I kept it, whether I would have authority to order it, let alone whether I should want to. If I keep the case, I'd make it clear to Mr. Gilligan that the court expects them to be kept preserved under those circumstances. And the Inspector General's office has the hard drives that Mr. Montgomery turned over to the FBI about 2 years ago. The videotape, the 302s, I have no reason to believe that they are with the Inspector General. I believe them to be in the custody of the FBI. I can contact the Bureau if possible today, but certainly by Monday to make sure they're put under an immediate litigation hold so there'll be no question of that. Why don't you go ahead and do that regardless of who the judge is? And they talk about Contreras at the end here. And at this point, Your Honor, I won't go blow by blow with Mr. Klayman on the number of representations he's made here today. But for another view of Montgomery, I can recommend Judge Contreras' decision in Montgomery versus Risen, which is reported, I believe, at 193, blah, 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 blah. The case is on appeal. Contreras inherited it after there was discovery, and we maintain that the intelligence agencies, through Risen, attempted to smear Montgomery, destroy his credibility as a witness. Contreras didn't do a good job. He wasn't thorough. Amazing. Contreras, and they're using, the CIA again is using Ryzen. I think it's Ryzen. And then he goes on again and says that he thinks that that everybody thinks that they're above the law. He goes into what happened when he was trying to serve these people and how their protection, their detail would tell them to get the hell out of there and not accept service. So they could never serve them. And that's the transcript in a nutshell. Now, why is that important? For a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it's super interesting, and I hope that I didn't bore anyone with my reading, but I felt like all of that was really important. We now know that all of the Montgomery hard drives are with Inspector General Michael Horowitz. We know that there's 702 abuse alleged in there, so is there a possibility that Horowitz is looking over the Montgomery stuff in relation to the FISA abuse that he's looking at? Absolutely. We haven't heard anything out of him lately, so we don't know where he's at in progress with the FISA abuse report that he's preparing. Another interesting thing, the judge in this case absolutely acknowledges that the court is politicized and that it's really hard to get a fair shake, you know, at a trial of any kind when there's a government, when there's government malfeasance involved. And we learned that Montgomery worked with Mueller at the same exact time, and he ordered the same sort of illegal surveillance. The swamp is deep, friends. The swamp is very deep. Now, this transcript is only available on Pacer, so I'm not going to be able to make it available to you guys to read yourselves, but I read like literally 3/4 of it. There's one more thing I wanted to cover with you guys before I move on. Here we go. Here's Sarah Carter and John Solomon on Hannity.
Joining us now with their special report and more, Sarah Carter, John Solomon. John, I'll start with you. Anything I'm saying here that's wrong, in your view?
Well, listen, we have a man tonight that filed a lawsuit that walked out of the NSA, CIA, and FBI with 47 hard drives, 600 million documents that were classified. This is way larger than Snowden. He gave it back to the FBI and said, the reason I took him is I want to sit down and show you all these mass civil liberties, and nobody's heard about this in the last 2 years. I think it's a pretty important story, and it goes to this larger issue of how much abuse may be going on beneath the intelligence community's cover. And we need to get an answer about how often our identities are compromised, how often our privacy is affected. We've been looking at this for 3 months, and there's a lot of concrete evidence, facts, that there are violations going on that need to be addressed.
And Sarah, so what your report is saying here is you had an ex-Intel contractor suing Comey, saying that the FBI, on a mass scale, covered up mass civil liberties violations against Americans, and he has evidence. Isn't that a little bit bigger than Russia collusion with no evidence, as I just proved up to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. This is on a much larger scale. We have seen the itemized reports of the 47, and we've posted them on our website at circa.com, of the itemized list of hard drives that he gave to the FBI, signed by the FBI. We have all the documentation to show this. And think about this, Sean. He said, and I just spoke to him before I came to see you, he said he unmasked, with the technology that he had, with the NSA, over 20 million Americans. 600 million documents. He said if you stack those up, that's 30 miles high. 30 miles high, but over 20 million Americans. And I said, well, what was it you were unmasking? He said everything, from their bank accounts, their homes, their records, phone conversations, emails. He was able to take down every single firewall. And it was so distressing because, you know, this is what he was directed to do. And when he tried to do the right thing, and he did, in his opinion, the right thing and got the immunity agreement from the FBI decided to not move forward. To not move forward with that investigation, and that's all he knew.
Did Comey know about this? Because the headline is that he's suing Comey, alleging this mass cover-up of civil liberties violations, and you're telling me 20 million? 20 million?
20 million people.
This is the
20
biggest...
million.
Wow. Did Comey know?
According to Dennis Montgomery, who is alleging that all of this happened and who is willing, he said, I am more than willing to tell anybody, face anyone, face Comey, face former director Robert Mueller, who was working at the FBI at the time when he began his work, because he spent 9 years working with them. Started out with the FBI, then went on into the CIA, NSA realm. And so when he began this, he said that, you know, he was willing to talk to anyone and testify before anybody, face Clapper, face Brennan, face Comey, and he would not back down, even though he is right now. He's struggling with some health issues. He just wants to get the story out.
John, I'll give you the last word. I'm imagining that if it's more information than even Edward Snowden, that there's beyond smoking gun evidence here. When will the American people see this?
Well, it's been assigned to a very well-respected judge, Judge Richard Leon here in District of Columbia. He's the judge that previously ruled that the NSA had violated Americans' privacy. And the court process is going to play out now, and there will be a venue now where Americans can find out if these things are true and if their violations have been going on that have been swept under the rug by our government.
And you've been able to see what evidence?
We have been able to see that he did get an immunity agreement, that he did turn documents over to the FBI. So that part of his story is confirmed. Wow. And now his lawsuit lays out the actual predicate. Sarah did a great interview with him with some really fascinating insights on what he witnessed during his 9 years as a contractor.
Guys, we'll have you back tomorrow. This is huge. Thank you for your hard work. This is important for our Constitution and you, the American people. We'll continue on.
God bless Hannity. I'm serious. Honestly, you know, he annoys me sometimes with his interrupting and nonsense, but let's be honest. I mean, nobody else talked about this. They went to Fox News back when Arpaio had this, and they filmed this story for a week, and it was squished. And way back in the day, because a lot of people on Twitter are like, this isn't a new story, this is an old story. Yeah, I don't know. By a show of hands, how many of you guys have heard this story before? I'm sure that a lot of you out there in the audience haven't heard this before. So the other thing that I wanted to mention to you really quickly is that I'm going to link this below. It's weird that this website came up because somebody sent me a bunch of emails and this website was there. This was posted in June of I'm sorry. It's this one. This was posted April 28th, 2018, and I found this too at the time on March 19th, 2017, before this lawsuit was in court. There is a Peter Strzok text message that says, I'm not going to respond to the whole group. The Klayman/Montgomery stuff in the email Jim, meaning Ray Bickey, I'm sure, just sent us is utter BS. Best to say nothing and brief later if necessary. So was Strzok one of the people involved in this case? The case was dismissed with prejudice because the judge ruled that the allegations of hacking and stuff that were made, that the government was spying on Klayman and the government was spying on Montgomery, they couldn't prove them. And it's a shame because the judge basically says, like, these are outlandish accusations. However, the case is on appeal right now, and Brennan is responding in the appeal. And you know what? I'm going to pull that up real quickly. And here it is. In appeal. The last action on it was December 4th, 2018. It was a reply brief from Klayman. Brennan, Clapper, Coates, Comey, Obama, Pompeo, Rogers, Trump, and Christopher Wray, only because they're in the agencies that were sued and not for any other reason. So we'll wait and see what the decision on it is. They're appealing. So Klayman hasn't given it up. And really, I mean, this is you know, I could go into more of the, I'm just seeing something. I could go more into the prison program and all of that stuff. If you guys want, just let me know in the comment section below. I'm just looking through this really quick. I haven't looked into it this deeply yet. I'm looking to see. Hold on. Yeah, that's really it right now. So they're appealing it, and we'll see what happens. Listen, I could go into, like I was saying, I just paused it, so I kind of got distracted. Let me tell you something. If you guys remember in the beginning of my video that I said it was 1 something p.m. Eastern time, it is now 8:36. Just to give you an idea. It's been a crazy day. Okay. If you guys appreciate the work I do and you would like to become a patron, I would be honored to have you. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/TracyBeans with a Z. You can find my PayPal address in the description box below. It has been a pleasure doing this video today. I really think this stuff is super interesting. Again, all the links for you will be in the description box below. Follow through, listen to this stuff again yourself. You know, let's keep this out in the forefront. It doesn't matter that this is 3 or 4 years old. Benghazi is 3 and 4 years old. We're still talking about that just as fervently, and sometimes not as fervently as we should be, but we need to keep going on this stuff. We can't just let it go. Very important. I mean, this is everybody. This is not just, you know, Trump and whoever. This is you and me being spied on and possibly framed if they don't like what we're doing. It's bad news. Those who give up liberty for security deserve neither. Have a great weekend, guys. I will talk to you very soon.